Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to ThreeFlowing. I am joined by my esteemed colleagues and fellow friends here, Mr. Ethan, the Guru Cundiff.
The Brazilian guru himself. Glad
And
to be
I'm
here.
joined here also by Mr. Daniel Cook.
Yeah, hey, I'm Daniel.
And we have possibly the guest that has been the hardest to get on the show and probably will be the hardest to get on the show ever. And that is, my dad. Please, Mr. Phil Hayes, say hello.
Hello.
Well, we're going to jump right into it. So the reason why I brought my dad on is, growing up, it's always been, he's always told me some cool stories, and he's had an illustrious life as a pilot, as working for CBS Records. So I figured, it would be a fantastic idea to bring him on and, see what other stories he's got to share. So without further ado, I got my itinerary here. So we're going to get into him being a commercial private pilot, notable passengers, and we'll jump into some other interesting topics. So, you, Mr. Hayes, or Dad, tell us a little bit about maybe hobbies, what you do for, when you're free time. Just so we can get a little, get to know you a bit more.
Well, okay. I've worked all my life. That's all I know how to do. So since I retired from the airline, I've worked about 3 or 4 other jobs, and I currently still work. So I don't have a lot of free time, but it's okay with me. I don't mind working. I like working. I'll just give you a little background. Would you like for me to start there?
Absolutely.
So, I was born and raised right here in Georgia. My mother's side of the family's been here for over 200 years.
Wow.
Really?
And we grew up, my mom and dad, my brother and I lived on the east side of town. I grew up on a dirt road on the east side of town, between Stone Mountain and Conyers. And how in the world I decided to be a pilot, I'm still not sure about, and I probably will never be sure about. The main thing was with me is when I was in school, the one thing that really interested me was geography. And growing up on a dirt road, my world was real small. So I knew that there was a whole big world out there. And somehow that path crossed with the idea of being a pilot. And that's kind of how, at least to my recollection, that's the best way I came across trying to be a pilot.
So for you, you might describe that as almost like a calling or something of sorts.
I guess you could say that, but it kind of has to be because it's a very, very difficult road.
Were there any airports around where you lived? And maybe
there was one little strip that I started learning to fly on. It's not there anymore. And so I started taking flying lessons when I was in high school. And it's a very long story. I can.
Sure.
Yeah, please share.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to ask, did you know anybody that got you into flying specifically?
Well, okay, so we'll pick it up there. When I was in the 6th grade in elementary school, this new kid showed up in class at the beginning of school, and he and I became fast friends. And I found out later his dad was a flight instructor. And so he would come in on Monday and he would talk about his dad taking he and his brothers flying, and they would go someplace and have lunch and this and that. And I just thought that was the coolest thing.
That's neat.
And so His dad eventually became my first flight instructor, and I took, well, once you take flying lessons, once you start taking flying lessons, if you decide you want to do it for a living, it's a very, very difficult path, and there's a lot of study, as you can imagine, and when you do it on the general aviation side, it's a very long path. It's even a long path in the military, but it's even longer in general aviation.
How many years for schooling with that, so the audience knows?
Well,
Formally, maybe?
when I went, well, I mean,
It varies, I'm sure.
you can get a 4-year degree flying from these aeronautical schools.
Okay.
Or you can just go to the local airport and learn to fly, and you really don't have to go through a formal school to learn to fly.
And that's what you did, right?
And so I went to a flight school,
Okay. You went to...
an aeronautical college out in Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Okay.
Spartan School of Aeronautics. And so when I came back from school, Vietnam was winding down, and the Navy and the Air Force, neither one had any slots for training pilots. And so I said, well, I'm going to have to do it through general aviation. So that's what I did, and it was a very long road. I started out flight instructing, and then I transitioned to instructing and then flying some charter and one thing and another. And all you do is just build your time. You're building your experience level.
Makes sense.
And who notably did you fly charter for?
Well, I started out with a company called Fulton Air Service at Fulton County Airport, and I flew charter with them. And I just little steps, working your way up.
Well, I've heard that you flew the great Arthur Blanc for Home Depot, the Home Depot owner and Falcons owner.
I unfortunately had no idea who that was. Forgive me.
I don't remember that.
Sorry.
That's what you told me.
It's okay. Lane just likes to make stuff up
I
sometimes.
like to make
so
stuff up. Yeah, maybe
It's
so.
okay.
Well, I knew you flew for Bill Corey, who was
I have.
Who's that?
Corey Enterprises. He owns a gasoline business, correct?
He was in the advertising business,
Okay.
and he started out in the gasoline business, and then got in the advertising business. And he has if you go north, if you go through town on 75, 85, right across from Grady, there's a smokestack there, and on the side of it says Corey, and that's
Oh, right. Yeah, I've seen that before.
And this is in
he
the
owns that.
Okay.
town of Atlanta.
In
And
Atlanta.
is he still alive?
Yep.
Do you know?
He's 93, I
Wow.
believe.
Getting up there. Huh.
Yeah.
And how long would you say you flew charter until an airline picked you up?
Okay, the progression was like this. So I flew, I instructed until it's like driving a car. When you're 16, the insurance is high as a cat's back because
Right.
you don't have any don't have any experience. Same with flying airplanes. No matter what your age is, if you don't have very much flight experience, you're a high risk. The more experience you have, the lower the risk and the lower the insurance rate. So you try to get as much experience as you can, so these companies will hire you to fly for them, and then you can build your time even more exponentially. So that's how it goes. And I flew. Well, to lump it all together, I started flight instructing in 1974, and I got hired at the airline in 1987.
Wow, that's quite a bit of time. 13 years?
Yeah,
Wow. So how long were you a commercial pilot for?
30 years.
30 years.
Wow.
So I'm sure over those 30 years you've had quite the number of experience. Like, what were some of the most memorable experiences that you had?
Could be people, could be
Yeah,
places,
just anything that stood out
crazy
to you?
stories, you know.
getting through school initially was a real big kick in the pants because the school was extremely difficult, and everything you've worked for your whole life up to that point is riding on that.
I see.
So my first position was the engineer on a 727. So the engineer in the 727, there's the captain, the first officer, and then the engineer sits behind. And on the 727, they were built so many years ago, everything is manual in it. So the guy sitting in the back ran all the systems.
And might I point out to the audience, we actually have the exact make and model of a 727 and the airline that hired you. So
Yeah, you guys want to hear something funny? I told my mom that you flew a 727, and she didn't believe. She's like, "There's no 727." I was like, "Yeah, there is. We looked at one the other day. We went out to the Delta Museum here in Atlanta. Right, it was like an outdoor type deal where we saw airplanes, and
Yeah.
I remembered you saying 727. She's like, "I don't think there's a 7." I was like, "Yeah, there is. Like, chill out, you know. You'll know what you're talking about."
Right.
Sorry, Mom. Sorry. All right, we'll get back to
So
on
with
topic.
being an engineer on the 727, you derailed him, Ethan.
We're good. We're
My train of
good.
thought is gone.
Well, you know, your purpose back there is to run all the systems. So you keep the fuel in balance. You don't let anything get out of balance, and you watch the electrical system, make sure everything's functioning like it's supposed to, and the heating and air conditioning system. You just basically run all the systems on the airplane,
Gotcha.
and that's what I did.
And before getting hired for Piedmont on the 727, just what are some other aircrafts you flew prior to this in charter? Just so we can
Smaller
get
stuff, right?
Yeah, normally
Typically?
smaller. Just for the audience, what other smaller airplanes did you fly during your charter period?
Well, I've flown. Well, I'll say these airplanes, but if you don't know airplanes, you won't know what I'm talking about. So
Well, hopefully our viewers
But I-
are a bit more.
Yeah, some people.
Even if they don't know, there's Google and things like
Exactly.
that, so
Right.
they can figure it out.
So I work for a Cessna dealership.
Okay.
So they're the airplanes that they use to train and charter and all that were all Cessna.
That's what I thought.
So I flew
Cessnas.
just about all of the Cessna line,
Okay.
and then later I flew a number of Piper aircraft, Piper Navajo and Aztec, different ones of those. Then I worked my way up. I flew a turboprop. It was a Mitsubishi MU2 and a Citation and and then a Mitsubishi Diamond is what it was called. And and then I flew a Cessna 402, which is a twin engine airplane, and that's what I was flying when I got hired at the airline.
And I thought it was cool. You told me maybe a month or two ago how you got hired at Piedmont, and I'd never really heard that before.
Wait, so Piedmont, is it a company or what?
Piedmont was a large airline. It
Okay.
still technically exists under the American Airlines umbrella,
Okay.
but it used to be a very large airline, and they were they had merged with USAir, or USAir, so-called ate them.
And is that the first airline you worked for? Was Piedmont as an engineer?
Were they
Okay.
based out of Charlotte or Atlanta?
Initially, I was based in Greensboro,
Okay.
and then Charlotte. And Piedmont was
It's an old airline. Started as Hinson Airlines back in.
it was a wonderful airline. It was a great place to work.
Hmm.
And there were two airlines that I wanted to go to work for, Piedmont and Delta, and I got hired at Piedmont. And then they merged later with USAir, became US Airways, and then they eventually merged with American, and was absorbed into American back in, I don't know, 12, 13, something like that.
So now we can go back, and I'm curious again because I can't remember it quite, vividly. But how did you get hired at Piedmont? What was the the catalyst?
Well, see, back then, it was so difficult to get hired, and it was so difficult to get anybody to look at your resume.
Mm.
And so you have to send them constantly updated resumes, and then there was a phone number, and you could call the phone and speak to the secretary, but she wouldn't answer the phone most of the time because the phone rang all the time.
Right.
And so once in a blue moon, she would answer, and you tell her who you were, and you would just keep doing that over and over and over until hopefully somebody would, see it. So what happened with me was that the guy we spoke of a few minutes ago, Billy Corey, has always been active with politicians as a businessman, and he called me up and he said, "Hey, Phil," he said, "Look," he said, "I got a guy I want you to fly down to South Georgia. He's going to give a speech." He said, "There'll be two of them." He said, "I want you to get some catering, and I want you to meet him over at McCollum at Marietta." I said, "Okay." So I got the catering, and I took the airplane over there and met him that morning. So the gentleman that was Billy's contact, the reason he wanted me to fly, who was going down to give a speech, was an aide to Ronald Reagan.
Mm.
His name was Len Nofziger. And so the chairman of the Georgia Republican Party was also with him, and I took the two of them down there. And so to South Georgia, we went to South Georgia, and on the way back, Len Nofziger let his seat back and took a nap, and the chairman of the Georgia Republican Party crawled up in the front cockpit with me, and he said, "Phil," he said, "is this what you want to do?" And I said, "No." I said, "I've been trying to get on with airline." And he said, "Well, which airline are you trying to get on with?" I said, "Piedmont." And he said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Well, the vice president of Piedmont is my next door neighbor."
There you go.
And he said,
What do you know?
He said,
Easy
"You got
money."
a resume?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, send it to me." And I sent him a resume, and he sent it over there, and it wasn't too long after that I got a letter to come for an interview.
So really it's about, you just had that chance encounter, and that kind of led to you getting the job. So just as an aside, I know a lot of young people, they struggle with finding a job. I was just curious your thoughts on, like, what is the secret to getting a job? Is it networking? Is it just having a good attitude, persistency? Like, what do you think?
Well, I think it's all of that.
It's everything.
You have to be persistent, and I tell Lane all the time, if you do something you love, you never go to work.
Absolutely.
And I was very, very fortunate. It was a very long, hard road for me, but I was very fortunate that they actually sent me a paycheck to do something I love to do, and a whole lot of people can't say that.
That's true.
But the other side of it is, if I was somebody who gave up easily, I would have never got that brass ring. Mm-hmm. Every time you get knocked down, you just have to get up and keep going, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and that's what you do all throughout life.
That's great advice. I love that.
Absolutely.
I'm all about persistence. I mean, as you guys probably already know, just pushing it to the limit, but also enjoying the process too, at the same time. Totally agree with that. Loving the process.
Like that old Eagles song, "Take it to the limit." That's right.
Oh, yeah.
One more time.
It's like you were mentioning, it was basically a 13-year process for you, essentially. So during that time, did you ever have doubts, or were you just kind of just gung-ho the whole time?
Well, I think back in those days, I think you're groomed to expect not to make it, because a whole lot of guys I knew didn't make it, and so you constantly keep an eye on the target, but you're also looking in the peripheral vision to see what what might be out there in case you can't reach that ring.
And what were some of your backup plans that you had?
Well, at the time, back in the 80s, Coca-Cola was a wonderful corporate job. Genuine Parts was a great corporate job. Different companies like that around town were kind of a fallback. I never really wanted to fly for the commuters, although I could have, but you know, dumb me, I wanted to go for the brass ring. I didn't want to fall short.
It's good.
And I think we touched on this earlier. I did, and we've discussed your beginning with Piedmont. But while working in charter, I had mentioned that you worked at CBS Records. So just for just a quick minute or two, to me, when you told me the story, I thought that was like the coolest thing because I'm a huge music guy, obviously. So while working at CBS Records, do you have any interesting stories while you were obviously trying to gain a foothold in the aviational industry?
Well, okay, this is a tangent here, but see if I can bring this around.
That's kind of what this show is. We all go off on tangents.
So,
Y'all know I love to rant.
Just let it free flow, Mr. Ace.
Free flow.
My first job was instructing, and you are too young to remember, but in '73 they had the oil embargo, and so gas was extremely expensive, long lines for gas at gas stations, and so the flying business was really slow. And so I worked, and some weeks were good, some weeks were not so good. So in my 3 years, I guess, as a flight instructor, I taught a guy to fly who was a record rep for CBS Records. And he said, well, come on. He said, if you're not doing it very good over here, he said, I'll get you a job at CBS. I said, okay. So I had no idea about the record business, no idea what I was doing. So they put me in the back, and I would catalog records and albums, and I would take it. Back then they had record stores, so I would take and set up displays in the record stores, and if they had album giveaways on 96 Rock and some of the other stations, I would take records to the radio stations for the giveaways. And so in working for CBS, obviously you have some exposure to some of the artists that are on the label. So they would have stacks of tickets for the concerts that were coming in, especially over the summer. And so if you want to go to a concert, didn't matter. They just give you tickets to go, but they're expecting you to be in the office the next morning at 8 o'clock too. So I got to go to a number of concerts and see different people. And the funny story that Lane was just speaking of was I was in the back office back there cataloging some records, and this blonde-headed, kind of had a full beard guy walked in his jumpsuit. And of course, this is in the 70s. So, but I looked at him and I thought, I spoke to him. I thought, who is this guy? And he kind of walked around and looked, and like he was waiting for somebody. And then later he walked out, and a buddy of mine came around. He said, he wasn't in your way, was he? I said, no. He said, you know who that is, don't you? And I said, no, I have no clue who he is. He said, that's one of the Beach Boys.
Really?
So,
Wow.
nice fella. But, you know, there were some other people that would come through the office and, you know.
Do you recall which Beach Boy it was? Just curious.
One of the Wilsons. I'm sure.
Who did I say?
I think it was Carl. It's
Yeah,
Carl.
maybe it was.
I think one of the Carl. Brian. I think Brian, Dennis, and Carl are the three.
Carl. I thought his name was Carl.
And I just want to say, I really want to buy a jumpsuit, by the way, pretty soon. So
What are you gonna do with a jumpsuit, Ethan?
wear it. I mean, obviously, just probably wear it on the show.
On the show?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that'd be pretty cool.
I think Mr. Hayes would like it, right?
Have you ever wore a jumpsuit, Mr. Hayes?
No.
No? You ever plan on doing it?
When I was an infant and I didn't know it.
Yeah. Well,
So I guess, a career in music is not something you're pivoting to at this stage.
I mean, I'm not trying to dress up like a baby, but
No, I wanted to fly airplanes. Two, I got to see a side of the record business that I just really didn't want any part of. They made a lot of money.
Absolutely,
If
yeah.
you work your way up to certain positions, they made a lot of money, but it was one of these things where if they liked you and you in the job you were doing, you did a really good job, they would say, okay, look, we got an opening over here in this job if you'd like it, and it's more money. And so if you move to that job, there is no training. You have to learn to do it and be able to do it. And if you can't do it, you're fired. And that's the way it went.
Sounds a lot like politics, honestly.
Yeah. So so I said, I don't want any part of that. So I left there and I went back to instructing and flying for corporations and I eventually got hired at the airline.
I'd like to note, I think we could go on a whole tangent about his work in CBS Records personally, but this is more
yeah,
designed
we'll
for
stick
around
it to aviation.
Aviation,
Yeah.
yeah. What the?
All you flight boys out there.
Yeah. So how would I kind of pivoting back to your career in aviation? What would you say are the biggest differences between flying commercial versus flying private? If you could just kind of compare those two.
Well, when you fly corporate, so you work for ABC Corporation, and if you're the chief pilot, then you have to make sure everything is looked after, the airplane's looked after, the maintenance is looked after. You got to make sure you coordinate with the scheduling and all the things that are particular to running an airplane for a company. And when you work for the airline, you're just one cog in the wheel. They got layers of people above you that plan the flights. As a corporate pilot, you have to file your own flight plan. You have to check, make sure you check the weather, which you do whether you're an airline pilot or not. Make sure the weather's good enough so that you can get the airplane on the ground at your destination, so on and so forth. There are all the different particulars. As a corporate pilot, that's all on you. As an airline pilot, you still have to check the weather and you make sure you have everything and just, you have the fuel that you want and all that sort of stuff. But they have dispatchers who file the flight plans for the airplanes, figure the fuel load, they know what the weight and balance is going to be and all that kind of stuff. So as a corporate pilot, all of that's on you. As an airline pilot, it's spread around to a whole bunch of people.
I love delegation. Y'all know that. So I think I would probably be better off,
So
that way.
the on the corporate side of it, flying corporate, you got to go to some cool places and so forth because the executives would go check on their warehouses or their businesses or whatever it is, and then every now and then the company would go somewhere and play golf and do some kind of thing like that. So that was kind of fun. Where the airlines, you don't really do that. The airlines, you do what your schedule says. You know, you're going to fly to these places. That's where your overnight's going to be, so on and so forth. So that's just, those are just some of the differences.
Do you have any like cool stories from some of the passengers, either flying? I mean, probably that'd be more private, you know, than commercial.
Something more memorable.
Anything crazy? Like just, whoa, like what's happening here? Like what is this person doing in the plane? And they're not supposed to be doing that. Let's not get too like, I don't want to get too inappropriate here, but you know, anything interesting and family friendly, but also funny and crazy. So.
Well, you know, we had you know, I'm sure there were funny things. I just can't, you know, nothing is coming up to me right now. You know, the guys you fly with were great most of the time.
Let me interject because
Go ahead.
he's told me. By the way, he's told me some of these stories a lot of times, and I still think you flew Arthur Blanc. You wouldn't lie. I know you said that to me. FYI. Anyway, there's a very famous movie star that came on your aircraft, and you recognized him as he was getting ready to sit down, and you said something to him.
Oh,
and
yeah,
he,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah. So we were in D.C. and we were supposed to go to Fort Lauderdale. I was flying a DC-9, and so the agents at all the airports are so anxious to get the airplane off the gate and away from the building. Once the doors closed, their responsibility is over with. So they were constantly, you know, are you ready? Can we board? Can we get out of here a little early? Da, 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 da. So they came down, and I can't remember the exact circumstance, but she let the first class passengers come down to board. And the cleaners were not off the airplane. There were still some of them towards the back of the airplane, so they had to finish and come up and get off the airplane. So the first class passengers came down, and the second guy waiting at the door to board, I kept looking at him. I kept thinking, wow, why do I know that guy? It's strange. He was, you know, tanned. He was well dressed, and had these deep lines in his face. I thought, and cleaners got off the airplane. First guy walks on, and right as he stepped through there, I went, it was Sean Connery. So I said, as he started past me, I said, Mr. Bond. He looked at me, he said, pleasure, sir. And he walked back and sat down.
That's amazing. That'd be incredible.
Really?
I'd love to have that experience.
So,
talk about a movie
Yeah.
style.
There you go, man.
experience
There
right
you
there.
go.
And I was gonna do my impression, but I'm gonna save everybody for that. I was curious though, because that kind of sparked a memory of mine of you telling me about some, I believe, famous people that you would see getting off the airplanes at some point, and maybe they'd wave to you, but you told something to me that kind of stuck with me. That you said everybody, when they get to a certain level of fame, acts the same. Pretty much.
you mean what I said about that they don't really want to be recognized?
Basically, you're just a very matter of fact.
You had
know.
been talking about, you saw Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers getting off, and they were getting into their limo or whatever to leave.
I think
Same
Lane
thing
told
with
me.
Hart, and you had said that, you know, they don't want to really interact. They just kind of want to go and do their own thing.
They do. Most people are that way. Most of the celebrities that I've ever run into, occasionally there's some of them that kind of you think they want to be recognized. Most of the time they just kind of like, they don't really make eye contact with you. They just kind of, they want to go about their business and be left alone.
And of the celebrities you've had on, it seems like Sean Connery was pretty nice. I'm thinking of one that you've told me, but he was also extremely nice. And he had helped out one of the flight attendants, or called one of the flight attendants' moms, because she was a huge fan of him. And I remember you telling me about that. Do you know who I'm referencing? he's thinking. The wheels are turning. I can see it.
The cogs are turning.
Oh, you talking about? Was that Tim Allen?
It was Tim Allen, yes.
Tim Allen. Oh, I love Tim Allen. Santa Claus.
Well, we were in Los Angeles, and he and his wife sat in first class, in the second row of first class on the right hand side of the aircraft, and he was one of those people that if somebody came in and recognized him and wanted to say hey and wanted to shake his hand or wanted an autograph, he was kind enough to do it. He didn't seem to be bothered, and almost everybody, I wouldn't say almost everybody, but a lot of people spoke to him, and he was just a very, very nice, outgoing guy. And so the flight attendant, what Lane's talking about, there was a male flight attendant, and his aunt was a tremendous fan of Tim's,
Mm-hmm.
and in that Christmas movie or something like that.
Yes. Santa
Yes,
Claus.
yes. Ho ho
And so-
neho.
And so he asked him if he called his elderly aunt, would she speak to him? Would he speak to her?
Oh, that's amazing.
And
Love
he said
that.
sure, and he did. And he said, she was obviously very thrilled about it.
That's cool.
That's so sweet, man. Imagine Santa Claus calling you. You know.
Right.
But also now, we were in Portland, Maine one time, and Cher came on, and her sister, and they sat in first class. And she also signed autographs. She was very nice to everybody. She, didn't.
Did you speak to her?
I think I spoke to her when she got on, but I can't really remember.
Okay.
I was going to say just real quick. I think obviously it depends on personality, but I can imagine just giving your energy away constantly to people can be probably really tough, and dealing with that. Some people handle it better than others, but I guess if you learn to enjoy it, like everything else in life, it's a blessing because you can really make someone's day. But that all depends on what you want to do.
Did you ask her if she believed in love? And I remember you told me you met Hulk Hogan was on in the
Oh,
airplane
Hulk
one day?
Hogan?
Yeah.
No way. You serious?
Yeah.
Whoa.
We were some.
I'm about to tear off my shirt. I'm so excited.
Just rip
Just rip off my shirt. Let's do it. Come on.
I don't remember where we were. And Hulk Hogan had walked up into the terminal, and everybody was coming up to him, and the kids wanted autographs and all this kind of stuff. And so the agent was trying to get him out of the boarding area and down the jetway to get away from the people. And right about the time she was trying to do that, I had walked up there and I was walking towards the door, and I heard what she was trying to do, and I said, well, come on, I'll walk you down. And she said, oh, thank you. So he and I walked down the jetway. And I just chit-chatted with him as we walked down, and, how you doing? He said, well, I'm doing all right till all of them get down here. Because they all want autographs and all that kind of stuff. So, but he was nice enough.
Was
Is
he
he like the larger than life personality that he presents?
was he out of Hulk mode, or was he kind of back in? What's his real name? Do you guys know?
I do
The
not.
producer
I have no
know?
idea.
No. Okay, I can't remember his. Sorry, Hulk. Sorry about that.
I mean, he was just okay.
He was just he's kind of
walked
out of character then, I
When
guess.
you walked him down the jetway, you say, "Hey, thank you, brother." No.
He may have. I don't remember.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that.
I think it's just amazing that you've met so many celebrities and business leaders in the world, just through your entire career in flying. And I'm sure that over those many decades in the aviation industry, you've probably gained, boundless amounts of wisdom. And I'd kind of love to talk about that a little bit. So in your words, like, how would you describe the biggest lessons that you've taken away from your career?
Why don't you ask me a hard question?
I think we went from small to deep in like 5 seconds.
We did.
It's like
Gotta
that.
get deep.
Whoa! Just my brain just went down the
All
rabbit
right,
hole.
lock in.
I mean, we could just take it, just
Yeah.
Well,
take it
I mean,
light.
it's Well, I'm not really sure what to say. You know, you learn from everything you do, and you learn from the people you're around, and you know, you just kind of, it molds you into the person you are. Each step you take makes you a little better towards the next step you take. I'm not really sure how to answer that question.
Well, being in a role such as a pilot and a captain, you know, leadership is a
Absolutely.
very big quality.
Leadership is
And
big.
I know that Daniel, Ethan, and I are,
Yeah.
you know, I think leadership is an extremely very strong characteristic that people aspire to have. And being in the position you're in, how, you know, what did you learn in that position of leadership?
Well, there are times when you have to lead, and
That's a given.
It's called
Every day,
leadership, yeah.
Mr. Phil.
and
Every day I got to wake
well,
up and
when
lead.
when the time comes,
I get you.
You have to take the bull by the horns and
Yeah.
do it.
No matter what, no matter how you feel, right?
Right.
Doesn't matter how you feel.
You have to, you know, and flying, unless you've been in the cockpit, when you're extremely busy, going into a very busy terminal area, lots of airplanes around, all that stuff. Until you've ever done something like that, you don't realize how stressful it is and how hectic things can get. And you have to be able to prioritize and multitask. You can't let yourself just focus on one thing. You're paying attention to a whole lot of things, and so that type of looking at things is not easy for a lot of people. It's learned over time, and the more you do it, the better you get at it, and so you learn not to be tunnel visioned and all that kind of stuff.
Staying cool under pressure, basically.
Yeah, absolutely, because as I've said to Lane many times, if you panic, you die.
And what are some of those things that you're talking about where you have to multitask, just for the people
Would
interested in
you give us an
aviation?
example? And there was one instance that I was thinking of. You were taking off, I believe, in Pittsburgh, and you were about at V1, and you had to abort the takeoff.
What's that mean, V1, for people not
It's the point of no
aware?
return.
Okay, if you could just explain that real quick for the people not in aviation.
I'll let you explain it.
Or
What is
him.
V1?
Yeah.
In a jet airplane, they learned back in the 50s when they transitioned from propeller airplanes to jet airplanes that a propeller airplane, once they got going to takeoff speed, they still had enough, they were still able to stop the airplane by the end of the runway. Whereas a jet was bigger, much faster, and heavier, and there were several accidents, but they realized that there has to be a point on the runway where when you get to that point, you either are flying the airplane or you're stopping the airplane. Once you hit that point, you're flying. There is no stopping. And that point was called, it's called V1. It's the speed that you're going to continue the flight.
You're committed.
You're committed. And so, so what you're talking about was we were coming to Atlanta. We were in Pittsburgh, I think. So we're coming to Atlanta, and it was about dark, dusk, and we taxied out. They cleared us for takeoff, and the guy I was flying with was flying the leg. And so normally what you do on a takeoff is he would push the power up. He would say set power. So you set the power, and then I scan the instruments, and then you watch the airspeed start to come up. And the airspeed comes up very, very quickly. So set power, scan the instruments, 80 knots, check, cross check. Make sure both of them are indicating the same thing. After that, the next call is V1. So So right, just prior to V1, I looked back to the instruments to make sure they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing. And right when I looked up, I saw something go by, and I felt a bump on the airplane. And he aborted right then, just before I called V1. And so we stopped and turned off the runway. I called inside. They said, okay, we'll give you another gate. We taxied to the gate and got off the airplane. And the mechanics had already put a ladder up to the left engine. And the guy was coming down the ladder, and he had, he said, you hit an owl. Because the feathers were the same as what we have in there on the table. And
We have owl feathers on the table for those
You
who
saved
don't
the
know.
feathers, didn't you?
Yeah.
And the engine on the back of the thing, when I crawled up there and looked, it's made out of titanium. I mean, it's a really extremely hard metal. And most of the teeth were shattered out of that thing. The first stage. Amazing.
That's a strong owl.
I really don't want an owl smoothie. That's just me, but
Ew.
I'm fine. I'd rather have some tropical fruit, like we have out here at the Oasis.
Really, that's some Ovaltine.
All right, there you
Oh,
go,
that's right.
Ovaltine.
Yeah, we got Ovaltine for you guys here. You know what Ovaltine is, by the way, Mr. Phil?
I do.
Did you drink it when you were a kid?
I did.
When you were a little baby or maybe a young child?
I'm sure I did, yeah.
It's wonderful.
So while we brought up that story,
That's good.
that's a point in leadership where you're multitasking and you're having to be on the dot, in you're on your game within a time that's extremely stressful.
Mm-hmm.
So it just calls to attention the fact that pilots are on their game and they're very respected.
And real quick, if you don't mind, how did you feel, like, just real quick, how did you feel when you had to abort? Like, was it like a feeling of like your heart's like, oh, you know what I mean? Were you just like, oh.
No, because you train, you train and train and train. And so, you
Were you calm?
You have a series of things that you have to do, and that's what you do.
Okay, that's good.
So it just becomes
That's good.
such a habit to you. So like even these spur of the moment decisions don't really phase you.
You can't let emotion enter into it.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to focus on doing what you do.
Yeah, and I mean, just with the creation of this podcast, I've noticed that I'm a very emotional person, obviously, but I think if I can keep myself calm, obviously things are better organized and orchestrated throughout this process, so I can totally relate with that in terms of this podcast.
I'd also like to bring it to your attention. I think it's funny, but it's also professionalism. So professionalism of pilots, they wear uniforms. They're very nice and kind to everybody. But I believe you were flying the 330 over to Italy, and you had a passenger that just happened to take a nap. And,
Common?
Yeah. But it wasn't like a nap to, it was a permanent nap.
Oh, someone passed away on the
Someone
airplane.
had-
No, nobody did that on my flight. But I had a friend of mine.
Okay. Well,
He was
Sorry.
on Venice, and the person died.
Fake
and-
news.
fake news. Well, that's very funny. But the professionalism would be that they, I guess, kind of kept it calm and let all the passengers kind of go about their way, and then.
Well, I mean, yeah, a lot of that stuff depends on, the sequence of events, because, if the guy's having some sort of medical issues and you're just starting to cross the ocean, you can turn around and come back. If you're in the middle of the ocean, you had to continue on, and depending on if the passenger's sick or what. But if they just found out that the passenger wasn't doing well, and then all of a sudden he's gone, and they're 150, 200 miles out of Venice where they were going, then they just continue on to the destination.
Gotcha.
So how many times in your career did you have to like deviate off the course for like a medical emergency or something like that? Just roughly.
Well, it happened. I can't tell you how many times it happened, but it did happen, unfortunately. One thing that people do, I think, is if somebody's heart's not very healthy, but they think they can make the flight. They don't realize the thin air and all this kind of the excitement and all that kind of stuff. If you got a problem, it'll push you closer to that problem. So, but there were a few times that we had medical problems. One time, I'll tell you a memorable sight. Mom and I were flying from Charlotte to New Orleans. We're going to do a turn and come back. And they used to launch the space shuttle early in its career from Cape Kennedy, and it would land in California, and then they would put it on the back of a 747 and fly it across the country back to Cape Canaveral. And Mom and I were on the 727, and she happened to be in the cockpit, and the 747 with the space shuttle on its back went by us, underneath us, and we got a chance to see it.
That's pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Wow.
How many people could say they've seen that? That's cool.
That's really neat.
Yeah, I guess though, speaking of like, deviations from the norm, I'm just curious, were you flying on a 9/11?
I was.
Really? What was that like?
Recall your 9/11 trip for the.
Let's talk about more deviations here.
Yeah, we like the tangents. We like the rabbit holes.
Yep.
Deviations in
I fly
aviation.
on 9/11, on 9/10, I had a trip. So the airline had these trips. They called them all-nighters. So you flew the last flight out in the evening, and you would go to the hotel, and you're basically on duty all night, although you sleep for ever how much you could sleep, and then you take the very first flight out the next morning. So you're basically on duty all night, and then once you get back, you're off. So I had picked up an all-nighter to Manchester, New Hampshire, the night before, 9/10, to give me a little bit more flight time for the month. And I got back to Philly that morning, and we took off from Philly, coming to Atlanta, about the time, within about 10 or 15 minutes of when the first airplane hit the tower. And in the ensuing things that went on, we were close enough to Atlanta when they shut down all the airspace that they let us continue to Atlanta. And, or I would have wound up somewhere, and who knows what it would have taken to get home, but I made it home. And
And we're glad you did.
and that was a very difficult time, because y'all cannot understand at that period, at that time, when 9/11 happened, the devastation that it did to the airline industry was tremendous. And the government and the airlines and all of us who worked for the airlines didn't know if the airlines were going to survive, if I was going to continue to have a job or not. That's how devastating 9/11 was. And the government set up this airline stabilization transportation board, ATSB, to loan the airlines money to keep them afloat until people would start to come back and fly. So there were a lot of airlines that were close to going out of business, and that would have been devastating for the country, because the airlines add a tremendous amount to the GDP.
Right. So when did the business start picking up again after that?
It took several years.
Okay.
Several years. It didn't. I mean, I don't really remember when it came back to normal, but it was probably 14, 15. 13 anyway.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, we're glad it did come back, and you retired from flying completely in about 2020. Is that correct? airline, I think you retired in 2016,
17.
17. But then you retired flying charter because I'm wearing
flew-
wheels up.
I flew several
His company.
companies, and I retired. Well, let's see. This June, next month, will be 3 years since I flew my last time.
Wow.
Oh, just prior to my 70th birthday.
Yeah. Do you miss it at all?
There are things I miss about it, but you know, packing a suitcase and no, I don't miss any of that stuff.
You don't miss all the travel.
You know, I miss destination.
Sure,
You know, I
location,
wish
right?
there are places that we all could go,
Absolutely.
and I hope that we will again.
Oh, we will. We will. Trust me.
But
Mm.
but there's
wait.
a lot of stuff that I don't miss. I don't. No.
I always like you being funny. I get my sense of humor from both you and Mom, and I love the story about you going to Mexico, and the PA system, and you for some reason or another decided to play James Taylor's Mexico on the PA system. So I thought that was great.
I don't know why this popped in my head, but Lane, I remember you telling a travel story about Mr. Hayes, about how he was in, I think it was Italy or something like that, and he was like brushing aside everybody, like, no, thank you, with all the
Oh yeah,
these people.
you with with the people that keep trying to come up and sell you stuff, like just street merchants. They come up, they just sell you crap and whatever. I remember walking with you, and just like, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you.
Oh, I
Just
know.
keep on moving, like push them away and everything.
I know how that is. Going down to Brazil, the guru. Oof, man, I had to really get those people out of my way. You know what I'm saying? Because there always be. So I know how you feel, Mr. Hayes. You got to really just. Sometimes you just want to kick them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just get in the way.
they do.
Yeah, just
But it's
gotta
a
be
different
about
culture.
business.
So
It's great. Do you have any advice for young people that are interested in getting into aviation in this day and age? I know we just had COVID, which also probably shook up the aviation industry. So just would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, the path to be a pilot now is way, way easier than it was when I came up. And if you really want to do it, you can do it. It's way easier, and there are avenues that will allow you to borrow the money. And I don't know all the parameters around it, but you can get low cost loans and all that kind of. They make it very, very easier, much easier to afford. And the thing about aviation, like a lot of things, is that you can't. It has to be something that you're just totally immersed in. You can't be 50%. You got to be in 100% or out 100%. You can't be in between. And I know that's true with a lot of other professions, but you'll do much better when you're 100% in. And plus, it's you have to be, because it's difficult, and a lot of the stuff just takes a lot of effort to get through.
did you see anybody that wasn't 100% in, and how that affected their life over time? Or was everybody other pilots that you worked with, were they pretty much on board 100%?
Well, when I was going to flight school, there were guys out there that thought they wanted to fly, but at the end of the day, you could tell they just weren't gung-ho about it. So I saw some of them fall by the wayside. There were other guys, when I got into the airline, that they liked flying, they liked the airline lifestyle, but they didn't like being away from home. So they would either fly one-day trips or all-nighters, or 2-day trips, or something where they didn't have to be gone from home, or they would get a job in the training department, or get a job in the chief pilot's office, or some kind of thing, so that they didn't have to be away from home. And there were a number of guys like that. I was the opposite. I love to fly. I look forward to each trip.
So there's a place for everybody then.
Yep.
That's good. That's good. All right, Will.
I was gonna say we have one last one on this particular segment. With the changes in the industry, when you started, I know that airplanes have evolved tremendously. So can you explain about when you got out and retired, what it was like going from, being an engineer? They don't have engineers anymore. What was it like starting from something so, I guess rudimentary to something completely advanced?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, all those years ago when I first started, everything was analog, and so that's just what you kind of cut your teeth on and grew up with, and all that.
Kind of like that clock over there. It's analog, I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure it's digital.
That's digital.
Sorry.
It's all right.
It's okay.
We all
okay.
make mistakes.
It's digital.
It's all good.
I think my brain's on analog right now. So.
There we go.
All right, now it's digital, so we're good.
So in about 2000, I bid over to the Airbus because I had never flown a flat screen or a flight management system, which is the brain of all these airplanes now.
The brain.
And so I had never flown anything like that. And so I went to school on the Airbus. And I wound up flying the Airbus for about 20 years. And that was a real difficult change to go from the old technology to the new technology.
I'm sure it was. I'm sorry. We're laughing at Ethan being a freaking
I apologize, Mr. Hayes. I'm sorry.
the guru. But yes, I know that I've seen the instrument panel inside this particular aircraft, and then I remember when I flew with you over to Madrid, I got to go in the cockpit of the 330, and it's just the difference is it's amazing.
Yeah.
And one thing I didn't realize too, just kind of reminds you of it, is I didn't realize how accessible. Like if you ask, a lot of pilots will actually let you look in the cockpit. Like Lane, when we went to DC.
I was going to say, who are you going to give credit for that?
That's what I'm saying. Like when we went to DC, Lane's like, just ask the flight attendant if you could have a look in the cockpit, and Lane asked on my behalf, and then they let me up there. I got a picture, behind the yoke. It was really.
Are you
a cool
serious?
experience. Yeah.
Wow, you can actually ask
I
him
had
that?
no idea that was even a thing.
What?
Yeah. I think pilots love for you to.
Nobody knows that. I don't think anybody. Guys, please
know
don't.
that,
Please
yeah.
don't all ask that question, okay? Please
One
don't.
at a time, please.
Yeah, one at a time,
I
guys.
would say,
for real.
would you say that pilots like to have people come up and interact?
Yeah, I would say most of the time that's true. There are personalities that prefer not to, and a lot of those personalities will close the door. So you don't have an opportunity to ask if you can come up there. A lot of it also depends on where they are in the boarding process.
Right. Yeah.
So if the airplane is supposed to leave and they're getting close to departure time, they're not going to let you come in the cockpit. So
Okay.
they'll say, check with us on the way out, something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to make them late for the flight.
Right. They won't let
Yeah.
you make them late.
Right.
Well, it's very, very interesting.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
sure you pilots would love having the guru just check out the cockpit and see what's going on, to brighten your day. You know what I'm saying?
And
Or maybe lock your doors.
I was about to say, maybe lock the door.
Well, yeah.
Well, I think we have one last particular story, and it is somewhat of a disclaimer to those. It's somewhat of a harder story, but it's very important in the aviational realm, and I'm very happy that my dad has allowed us to talk about it. So, if you're all right with you, I know that you were unfortunately in a plane wreck in 1994 on July 2nd, and I know that was certainly probably a height of the of remembrance, and I know that probably changed the way that you went about going into the airplane, but I find it very inspirational that you got back from that incident and kept on flying to push through. But for those who don't know, would you mind going through the sequence of events that transpired?
Well, if you're talking specifically about the plane crash, is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Well, just very briefly, I won't go into it very deeply, but I was flying a DC-9. We had flown to Columbia, South Carolina. We're on our way back to Charlotte, very short flight. And as we made our turn, as we made our way towards the airport, there was a rain shower building up, but it didn't look like anything substantial, nothing to worry about. As we made our turn downwind, the controllers didn't see any problems with it. And as we turned downwind, they told us to expedite our descent. They're going to turn us around, so we get a visual on the airport, or turn us on the ILS for the instrument approach, because they said there was a little rain south of the airport. It might be moving up to the north. So they turned us around, and we were on the approach, and we basically were blindsided by a microburst. So a microburst is just a heavy column of air that comes down out of the top of a thunderstorm as it matures, and it's a very strong and violent movement of air, and we were low to the ground, and we tried to go around. We couldn't. The microburst overpowered the airplane, and we crashed. And so that was July 2nd, 1994. And let's see.
And that's USAir Flight 1016.
Yes.
For anyone interested in doing any further research on that.
Would you mind giving your firsthand account as to what, because you were the pilot flying, just what it felt like? Because I'm sure you were all in procedure, but what do you just recount going in on that day?
Everything was completely normal until we were fairly close to the runway, and there was rain, some rain between us and the runway, and we hit the microburst, and we tried to go around and make the right turn to get out of the microburst, and the microburst forced us to the ground, and the airplane came to a stop in the middle of a road off the airport. The airplane broke in two. Tail section landed basically at a carport of a house, and well, as you can imagine, that whole thing happened extremely quickly, and within a matter of seconds.
And did you lose consciousness, I assume?
I'm not sure. I said all along I never lost consciousness, but I'm at this stage of the game I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember? The impact from hitting the ground?
Yes,
How did it feel?
hard.
As hard as like the hardest thing you've ever felt, just shattering to your.
I remember you telling me you hit the ground, and I remember you telling me you remember seeing the bushes, and just shrubbery.
Well, you have to remember we were probably doing
Right.
almost 140 miles an hour when the airplane hit the ground, or thereabout. And so, and we also had the gear down. We had not retracted the gear. So,
You mean landing gear, or what is? Okay.
and again, it happened so fast that the airplane went through the bushes. I remember something hitting the windshield. We hit an oak tree, and broke the airplane in two, and spun the airplane around. And the good Lord was looking after me because the airplane went. There were several oak trees, and it turns out that the airplane went right between two of the oak trees, and it spun around, and the cockpit stopped in the road because had it hit the oak tree head on, I wouldn't be here.
Did you sustain any injuries from the crash?
Yes.
What were the injuries, if you don't mind me asking?
I broke metatarsal bones on my left foot. I got a gash in my head, and I had my head sewn up, and that was the worst of it.
And did you feel the pain immediately, or did the adrenaline hit you, and then it was like later on you felt the pain?
I guess more specified was, what do you remember
Yeah.
waking up, like when the plane came to rest? What do you remember or recall?
I remember my seat track had failed, so the seat was sitting way up, and I was way up on the dash. And I remember got out of my harness, and I crawled over the back of the seat. And when I got over the back of the seat, I could see that the wall behind the seat, from that wall back, the airplane was gone. So, and I could see fire outside the airplane. And so I crawled out, and I tried to stand, and I realized I fall down, get up, fall down, and I realized my foot was hurt. And a couple of guys helped me away from the airplane, and I sat and waited until the ambulance came.
I remember you told me that you remember the rain coming down, and you remember hearing the sirens in the distance, and you just waiting by the tree or by whatever you were leaning against.
That's two different things. So I remember the rain coming down on the windshield on the approach, and it was extremely hard. I remember we went from heavy rain to, it was like walking under a waterfall. And then right after that, we went around. As far as the sirens go, that was when I was sitting on the ground outside the airplane after they helped me away from the airplane. You're just in a daze that something like this could have happened. And then I remember I could hear the siren and way off in the distance. And then I could hear them getting closer and closer.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine what was going through your head during that time. I mean,
Yeah,
I
same
don't
here.
think anyone can really prepare for anything like that to happen.
No, you're just in shock.
Were you thinking about your loved ones, I imagine?
No, you're just in shock.
You just don't know.
Not really thinking, I'm sure.
Yeah, gets in shock.
And how did that affect you emotionally and professionally afterwards?
Well, let's see. I guess the best way I could say is, for the longest time, for the longest time, I had survivor guilt. Why am I still here and these people are not here? And that bothered me for a long, long time. And you finally process it and put it where it needs to be, and and you deal with it. But the fact that these people are not here anymore, I don't think about it as much as I used to, but I still think about it. And I'm not the kind of person that would say, well, why did this happen to me? Oh, poor pitiful me. I'm the kind of guy that you deal with it. It's hard. It's very difficult, but when you have your family to rely on and all that sort of thing, you slowly. It's a very slow process, but you eventually get past it and things get better. But back to what we said at the start of this, if you're the kind of person that gives up easily, that's going to throw you in the pit.
Right.
But if you're the kind of person that's, this is not going to get me, I'm going to get it. If you get up, as hard as it is, you get up and put that, and make that next footstep, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and it'll eventually get better and better.
So do you recall flying for the first time after this had happened? Like, did you immediately know that, like, I want to continue flying, or what was the process like?
Well, it's a good question. No, I didn't. Honestly, I was not certain that I would ever fly again. And that's the kind of thing that you just have to process, and it takes time, and you work through it. And I was off for, I was off for about a year. And then finally, I said, well, if I'm ever going to do this again, I better do it. And so went back and went through the training in the sim and got back, and then I had to take a check ride with the FAA. And so when I finished the check ride, then I was back and I could continue.
You seem to be your own Rocky story, and like I said, it's always been inspirational to me that you got back in the saddle per se and did it and finished out. And for those who don't know, what we're talking about now is actually on an episode of Air Crash Investigation called Storming Out. And I'll just close with this. It was July 2nd, 1994. It was a DC-9, and there were 57 people total. 37, unfortunately, were killed, and 20 survived. And Mr. Hayes here, my dad, is here to, talk about it, but also bring some, put some smiles on our faces, because, like I said, as I like to joke, I get my humor from you, so I appreciate the the sarcasm and the love shown. But I
just think it's remarkable that you came back and you didn't let this setback stop you from having a really remarkable career in aviation, because you continued flying for a long time after, and I just think that's inspirational for everybody to see.
It is very inspirational.
And I guess just one follow-up question that I had about that is, given there's a lot of recent attention that's been placed on airplane crashes and whatnot, given what happened at Reagan National and some other incidents lately, do you see that there is an increase, or is it just being covered more, or what do you think is the reason behind a lot of these crashes?
Well, there haven't really been that many crashes.
Mm-hmm. Or incidents, I guess I should say.
I think it's very unfortunate about the commuter plane crash in Washington. That was appears the helicopter pilot was at fault there, but they're still investigating that. But that aside, aviation is still the safest way to travel, and the other facet to that question is the FAA needs to modernize the air traffic control system, and they've known they need to do it for years. And so now it seems like this may be the catalyst that prompts all that.
It's very interesting. And I guess kind of on a completely unrelated subject, but just as a bonus question that I really wanted to get in.
I think the guru is going to like this one.
I think you should ask it, Ethan. Actually, go ahead.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm not like a huge fan of conspiracies, but, you know, extraterrestrials are pretty interesting, and UFOs and whatnot. And obviously, you know, you've probably had experiences with UFOs. Is that right?
You know, at night, certain places, you can see satellites way up there. The only UFO experience I ever had was I was flying the Airbus. We were going to the West Coast somewhere. I don't remember where.
I hope it was Las Vegas. I'm just saying, sorry.
And we were kind of the northern Rockies, and we were at altitude, and all of a sudden it was dark out there except for the stars, and all of a sudden you see a light, and then it becomes this really bright light, one single bright light, way brighter than a landing light. And it came up to sort of where we were, and it turned to the south and disappeared. And I asked the controller, I said, "You show any traffic out here? It just turned southbound?" He said, "No, I don't show anything. I didn't see anything."
So it came right at you, as bright as could be, and then just...
We were flying here. It didn't come at us. It was just slightly to our left.
And then just shot away.
Turned south and disappeared.
So faster than anything that you could reasonably assume could be capable of that.
But see, we're out there in the west, and in Nevada, the Area 54,
Or 51.
51, they work on that stuff out there all the time. And
We love you, Nevada.
in right outside Tonopah. And so, was it something they were doing? I don't know.
And I remember you telling
Maybe.
me that you fly out there and you would see the bombers, the U.S. Air Force bombers or whatever that would go on their long haul missions, and they'd, you'd see them come back and see them go to wherever they were going.
Well,
This is what you told me. I know I'm not making this up, by the way.
I don't know, Lane, you've told a few fibs this episode.
what
I've
I told you I saw, this is what comes to mind. I don't remember what I was talking about, but
He lied to me.
in the war with Iraq, they had those B-2 bombers, B-1, whatever they were. I can't remember what they're. They're flying wing.
Yeah.
And each airplane is way over $1 billion for each airplane. So they're so expensive, they don't take a chance of having the airplane land in hostile territory, anywhere near it. So they would load it with bombs in Nebraska, and then they had the refueling points all the way across, so the pilots would take off from Nebraska, fly all the way to Iraq, hit the target they were going after, and then refuel and fly all the way back without ever landing until they got back to Nebraska. So one day, 1,000 feet above us, this B-2, I guess it was, I can't remember what they call those, the flying wing, they called traffic for us. He didn't say what it was, and They went right by, and they were going back to Nebraska.
And they didn't stop. They just kept going.
That's got to be an uncomfortable, pee break.
That's what I was gonna say. I don't think
That's a
the
long
guru
way.
can hold his urine that long. Y'all know already.
Well, we appreciate the all the stories. I tell you, it's just a wealth. I'm looking at the time clock. We normally try to keep it around 40 minutes to an hour.
I think this one
but
deserves to be
This one,
longer.
yes, definitely
I mean,
deserves.
There's so much knowledge here, and I'm sure we could go on for hours
We
longer,
really could.
but there's just so much there.
Like I wanted to ask you, like, what you thought maybe those aliens were, if they were greys or reptilians or maybe the tall whites. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the races, but I think they discussed that in Congress recently. Look it up, guys. But
He's doing work right now. Okay.
yeah, he's got his Apple. You got your Apple Watch, right?
It's like, where do I go with
He's
this?
like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Who knows what they are? I don't know if it's government aircraft or if it's, extraterrestrial. I mean, I'm not going to spend my time.
I've had many guys, Air Force guys, tell me this, and this is the honest truth. I've had them all tell me, and they tell me in exactly the same way. They're told when they're flying in their training, anytime they're flying an airplane, anytime they're flying anywhere near Area 51,
Mm-hmm.
if they had to make an emergency landing, if they went into Area 51 at all, their career was over. They could not go there, no matter. You can have any emergency you want, you better not go there.
Wow.
I'm not going to Area 51. None of us are. I mean, I don't want to get shot.
I might
so
go to the gate, look around,
I don't want to risk
It'd
it.
be
That's
fun.
not risky, man. That's too risky.
I mean, maybe
The
it's
search
good,
for a better
good
Ovaltine. We have the best Ovaltine here, but we're the search for
That's probably
the
what
best
they're.
one is
That's
in
probably
Area
what they're
51.
making is like Ovaltine there.
In Area 51,
That's
yeah.
the big secret.
Exactly.
Get that
We can all-
extraterrestrial
all join
Ovaltine.
it.
Look at that. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for your stories, and just to say I love you and thank you so much again.
Yes, thank you so much.
I very much
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you for being so candid.
We
today.
appreciate you, Mr. Hayes. You're really
With-
inspirational.
With
You're
the
welcome.
Thank you.
Ovaltine, would you mind, producer?
Yeah. You could pass us the
Ah.
Sharpie too.
I got the Sharpie right here.
Perfect. This is a tradition that we have. Every guest that we have on the episode, we would like to give an autographed canister of Ovaltine.
No, it's called
So we're going
Ovaltine.
to-
We got to use a tone. Shout out to my friend Paul, who might be
Sure.
watching this.
Yeah, we're goofy, I know. I mean, hey.
Not hard to send a canister. They also label it number 1.
All right.
There you go.
Where's the guru going to sign at?
Just wherever you like.
Can I sign at the top?
Wherever you want.
Wherever you want.
All right. All right. You want this, Mr. Hayes? Pen.
Yeah, take that.
Here you go, Mr. Hayes.
Yeah, well, thank
There's
you
some
so much
Ovaltine.
again for coming on. And thank you all, the audience, for tuning in to ThreeFlowing this episode. Tune in next week for more inspiring stories such as the one we heard today.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you all so much. God bless. Have
We
a
love
great
you.
one.
Ciao.
All right, thank you so much.
Very good. That's a
Very
wrap.
good.
Very good. Very good.